After my son died, my daughter-in-law and her lover threw me out, but my sons will changed everything. Those words still burn in my memory, like a headline I never wanted to read. The day started quietly, almost normally, until the phone call came. I remember it perfectly. My knees went weak, and my hands trembled as I listened to the words no mother ever wants to hear. My only son, the boy I had held in my arms, the one whose laughter filled every corner of our home, was gone. Just like that, in a heartbeat, the life I had known evaporated. I'm F, born in 1965 in Lagos. Back in my late 50s, I had poured every ounce of love, effort, and hope into raising him alone after his father passed away. I felt invincible then, like nothing could touch the world I had built around my little boy. I felt grief, yes, but also a strange emptiness that I couldn't name. The home, once full of laughter, now echoed with silence. I never imagined that, in addition to mourning, I would have to fight for my place in the very house I had lived in for decades. It all began the night I returned from making arrangements for his funeral. I had barely crossed the threshold when I noticed something was off. The living room looked different, staged almost, like it belonged to someone else. My daughter-in-law, Ada, stood there with a smug smile, her hand resting on the shoulder of a man I didn't recognize immediately. He had the kind of charm that made people trust him instantly, but I felt an uneasy twist in my stomach. Before I could even say hello, Ada spoke. "Mom, we need to talk. About the house, and everything else." I paused, my heart pounding. "Everything else?" I asked quietly, sensing the storm coming. "Yes," she said, almost casually. "We've decided you can't stay here anymore. It's complicated." Complicated? My mind raced. I had nursed her through pregnancies, cooked countless meals, and attended every family gathering as if she were my own daughter. And now she was kicking me out? "Ada, what are you saying?" My voice shook, though I tried to mask it. She smiled, a thin, calculated smile. "You understand, don't you? You need to leave. This house, it's ours now. All of it." I felt the room spin. "Ours? This is my home. My son's home. You can't just..." Her lover interrupted, his tone smooth, almost rehearsed. "F, it's easier if you just go. There's nothing left for you here." I stared at him, at her, my stomach sinking. It felt like the floor had been pulled from beneath me. Memories of raising my son, of every Christmas, every birthday, every sleepless night I spent worrying about him, it all seemed to mock me now. And the audacity of them, acting like I was the intruder in my own home, sent a jolt of disbelief and fury through me. I gathered my strength, trying to negotiate, to reason. "You can't do this. You have no right. This house isn't yours." Ada's eyes gleamed with something I hadn't seen before. Greed. And entitlement. "Mom, think about it. You're older now. You've had your turn. Maybe it's time for new beginnings, for us." "New beginnings," she said, as if my son's absence gave her the authority to erase my place in his life. My son gone, and suddenly everything I had worked for seemed fragile, like a sandcastle swept away by a merciless tide. I felt anger, of course, but beneath it all was the sharp, stabbing pain of betrayal. I had trusted her. I had believed in her care for him, for our family. And yet here she was, revealing herself for what she really was, a woman willing to erase the past to satisfy her greed, supported by a man who was probably just waiting to claim everything my son had built. I had nowhere to go that night. Friends offered condolences, but the house was my son's, my memories, and now the people I thought I could trust had turned against me. I slept in a small guest house, feeling the cold bite of solitude and betrayal. I wandered the empty streets, clutching my coat around me, feeling as if the world had shrunk to the size of my grief. Every corner, every shadow reminded me of the son I had lost. Yet, even in despair, a small ember of determination flickered inside me. My son had been clever, meticulous in his planning for his future, and I remembered his words, "Mom, no matter what happens, I'll make sure you're never alone." At the time, I had smiled, touched by his thoughtfulness. I never guessed he might have anticipated the betrayal that would follow his death, the kind that would leave me not just heartbroken, but homeless. In the following days, I began to notice details Ada had overlooked. Letters left casually on shelves, certain accounts still under my son's name, subtle hints of financial planning. There was something hidden, something he hadn't shared fully. I realized, as I sat on a cold bench in the park one rainy evening, that perhaps my son had left me more than memories. Maybe he had left a trail, a way to ensure that the people who betrayed us wouldn't get away with it. As the days passed, I forced myself to eat, to sleep, to maintain some semblance of life. I talked to neighbors, old friends, anyone who might remember how devoted my son had been, how he had always looked out for me. Pieces of conversations came back to me, offhand comments about accounts, safety deposits, passwords. Little by little, I began to piece together that my son had been planning for all eventualities, including the unimaginable Ada taking everything from me. I cried more than I can count, but there was also clarity. Grief, I realized, was not only a shroud to bury you under. It could also be a lens to see the truth. And the truth was this: I was not powerless. My son had left clues, and it was my job, my right, to follow them. I had to be patient, clever, and unyielding, just as he would have wanted. That night, as I lay in the guest house bed listening to the distant sounds of the city, I made a silent vow. I would reclaim what was rightfully mine. Not with shouting or anger, but with careful, deliberate action. I would honor my son's memory, expose the betrayal, and perhaps, just perhaps, find a way to see justice done. Even in betrayal, I realized, love can guide you. My son's love had left me the tools to survive. Ada and her lover may have thought they had won, but I felt the spark of hope ignite. Somewhere in the midst of grief, I had found purpose. And that purpose would lead me to the secrets he had hidden, secrets that would change everything. I never thought a piece of paper could feel heavier than a stone, but my son's will did. The day I finally got my hands on it, the legal office felt impossibly quiet, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for me to uncover what he had left behind. Ada hadn't expected me to come prepared, and she certainly hadn't anticipated that I would be the one reading it. I unfolded the crisp pages, my hands trembling, and began to see the clues my son had so carefully hidden, the roadmap he had left for me to follow. The will was unusual. It didn't just list assets or property. Instead, it was layered, almost like a puzzle. There were phrases like, "to the one who honors my memory," and "seek where I kept our dreams safe." At first, I felt bewildered. I had always known my son was clever, but this was a level of foresight that bordered on extraordinary. Each sentence seemed to carry a double meaning, a test of loyalty and observation. He was asking me to think, to prove that I understood him, and that I could carry on the care and love he had for me and for our family. I went back to our home, now mostly hers, under the guise of returning a few personal items. Ada tried to block me, her face painted with feigned warmth. "Mom, you should really focus on moving forward," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. I smiled politely, nodding while my mind raced. Every room, every drawer, every bookcase I had once touched became a part of the puzzle. I remembered where he used to keep little notes for me, little hints left in ordinary places, his favorite novels, his desk drawers, even behind photo frames. It was as if he had known she would try to erase me, and he had anticipated my search. One evening, I sat in the corner of a quiet cafe, the will spread across the table, a notebook beside me, and a cup of steaming tea warming my hands. The clues slowly began to form a pattern. My son had designated a trustee, someone outside the immediate family, who held the key to unlocking the fortune, but only if I could demonstrate that I truly remembered him, that I respected his intentions, and that I refused to be intimidated by deceit. It wasn't enough to claim money or property. I had to show devotion and intelligence, to follow the path he had charted for me. It took days of going back and forth, piecing together his riddles. Some were straightforward, like references to our garden where he loved to plant roses. Others were cryptic, like lines in his favorite poetry collection that pointed to a safety deposit box at a bank he had visited with me once. Each discovery filled me with a mixture of hope and grief. Hope, because I could feel his guidance even from beyond. Grief, because I was reminded of the empty space he had left in my life. I remember one particular clue that made me laugh softly through my tears. It was a note tucked inside an old recipe book, written in his unmistakable handwriting. "Mom, remember when Aunt Mabel tried to bake cookies at midnight? Check where the chocolate chips hide." I chuckled, picturing his mischievous grin. The note pointed me toward a locked drawer in my kitchen, one I had overlooked countless times. Inside was a key and a small envelope with numbers and letters that seemed meaningless at first. Slowly, I realized it was a combination of another step in his clever plan. There were moments when frustration threatened to take over. Ada had changed locks, shuffled papers, and tried to make the house feel impenetrable, but each time I faced a setback, I reminded myself of something my son once told me: "Patience, Mom. There's always a way if you look carefully." I took his words to heart. I revisited old accounts, asked questions in subtle ways, and even spoke to family friends who had noticed his quiet planning. No one suspected that I was following a trail that only I could truly interpret, a trail my son had built for me. As I deciphered each clue, the pieces began to form a bigger picture. He had not left his fortune to Ada, despite what she believed. In fact, the way the will was structured, it made clear that she would inherit nothing unless she could prove loyalty to him, honor, and integrity, and she had already failed that test before I even opened the document. Every discovery, every step closer to the truth, brought a sense of empowerment that I hadn't felt since his death. I was no longer just grieving, I was acting, moving forward with purpose. One late night, as the rain tapped against the window of my small rented room, I finally understood the final clue. It was hidden in a letter I had received from him years ago, a note I had kept tucked in a drawer, thinking it was just sentimental. In his handwriting, he had written about his hopes for my future, subtly hinting at the location of his most valuable possessions. The letter mentioned our favorite bench by the river, the place where we had spent countless hours talking about life, love, and dreams. I realized that the last piece of the puzzle wasn't a document, a key, or a bank account. It was me. My devotion, my memory of him, my willingness to honor his life. With the final clue in hand, I felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. My son had planned for me, even after his passing, ensuring that justice would prevail in the face of betrayal. The will had guided me to a hidden fortune, not just money, but evidence of Ada's deceit and mismanagement. I knew what I needed to do next. I had to move carefully, exposing the truth without alerting her prematurely. Every step, every choice, was now informed by his guidance and by the clever framework he had left behind. I smiled faintly, remembering his words one last time before closing the notebook. "Mom, you've got this. It's okay to feel lost, but trust yourself. You're stronger than you know." Stronger. I felt the truth in that word, the way it wrapped around my heart like a protective embrace. I realized that my son's foresight had given me not just a roadmap to his fortune, but a path to reclaim my dignity, my home, and my life. The grieving mother I had been was evolving into someone capable of facing deceit with courage, using intelligence, and honoring her son in a way Ada never could. It was time to act, but carefully, deliberately, and with the quiet satisfaction that comes from knowing the truth is on your side. I packed the clues, the keys, the letters, and made mental notes of every detail. I wasn't just planning to reclaim property or wealth. I was preparing to reveal the betrayal in a way that left no room for denial. And as I stepped out into the night, the city lights shimmering like stars, I felt my son's presence guiding me forward, a reminder that love and justice can survive even the harshest betrayals. By the time I was ready to confront the outcome of my son's plan, I had learned patience, observation, and restraint in ways I never imagined. I had traced each clue to its source, uncovered the hidden accounts, and documented the evidence of Ada's betrayal. The fortune my son had left wasn't just money, it was a carefully constructed shield, a way to expose deceit without resorting to rage or confrontation. I realized that revenge didn't have to be loud or destructive. It could be quiet, clever, and devastatingly effective, like a chess master cornering an opponent who had underestimated you. I arranged a meeting at a neutral location with the trustee my son had designated. She was a professional, firm, and courteous, and I felt reassured by her calm confidence. "You've done well to come prepared," she said, studying my notes and the clues I had compiled. "He trusted you to see this through, to prove that his intentions would be honored." I nodded, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt since my son's passing. For the first time, I sensed that I was not alone. His love and foresight were guiding me every step of the way. With the trustee's support, we initiated the legal process quietly but decisively. Evidence of Ada's manipulation, the lover's complicity, and the deliberate attempts to conceal assets was presented alongside my son's carefully worded will. Each document, each clue I had unearthed, reinforced the truth. Ada was unfit to inherit, and the wealth was rightfully meant for someone who had truly honored my son's memory. Ada tried to fight it, of course, her smirk faltering as she realized that her schemes had been anticipated, her deceit exposed in black and white. I remember the day the court ruling came through. Ada's eyes widened, her carefully constructed confidence cracking under the weight of undeniable truth. She couldn't argue against the evidence, couldn't spin a story that would absolve her. And in that moment, I felt not only triumph but also relief. The house, the inheritance, and the peace my son had intended for me were finally restored. The air seemed lighter, almost sparkling, as though my son's presence had been quietly celebrating with me from wherever he was. I returned to my home slowly, savoring every step, every familiar corner that once seemed lost to me. I opened the door and let the memories wash over me, the laughter, the arguments, the quiet nights spent together. This home, built on love and care, was mine again, reclaimed not with anger, but with perseverance and cleverness. Ada had been left with nothing but the reality of her choices, powerless and exposed, and I found a strange satisfaction in that. The betrayal had been sharp, but justice, as my son had designed it, was sharper. Even as I settled back into my routines, I reflected on what had happened and what I had learned. The experience had been harrowing, yes, but it had also shown me the depth of my resilience. I had felt grief that threatened to crush me, but I had transformed it into clarity and action. I had realized that love can be a protective force, that foresight and intelligence can shield you from even the most ruthless betrayals. My son had trusted me, and I had honored that trust by seeing the plan through to its end. There were quiet moments, too, when I would sit in the garden we had planted together, recalling the times we had shared, the advice he had given, the little notes he had tucked away for me. Tears still came sometimes, but they were accompanied by gratitude. Gratitude for a son who had loved so deeply that he ensured my protection, gratitude for the clarity I had gained, and gratitude for the quiet, powerful victory that reaffirmed my worth and strength. I didn't seek confrontation beyond what was necessary. I didn't shout or curse. I simply let the truth, the evidence, and the will speak for themselves. Watching Ada and her lover come to terms with their loss was almost surreal. They had thought they could erase me, silence me, and take everything. Instead, they were left exposed, powerless, and facing consequences they had not foreseen. The satisfaction of knowing that justice had been achieved not through anger, but through careful observation and adherence to my son's guidance was profound. Friends and neighbors noticed the change in me. I was no longer just the grieving mother. I had become someone who carried herself with quiet authority, someone who had faced betrayal and emerged stronger, wiser, and more assured. People often asked how I had managed to recover so completely, and I would smile softly, remembering the journey. It's about patience, observation, and love, I would say. And trusting the people who truly care for you, even when you can't see them. They didn't fully understand, but that was okay. Some lessons are meant to be lived, not explained. As weeks turned into months, I rebuilt my life around the home I had regained. I found solace in simple pleasures, the sound of rain on the roof, the smell of fresh bread baking in the kitchen, and the warmth of a chair I had once shared with my son. Each day, I felt a connection to him, a reminder that love and wisdom can transcend even death. His foresight had protected me, his memory had guided me, and his trust had empowered me to reclaim not only my home, but also my dignity. I realized, finally, that the real victory wasn't just legal or financial, it was emotional. I had faced the ultimate betrayal and emerged with my integrity intact. I had honored my son's life and memory in a way that Ada could never replicate. And in that quiet triumph, I found peace. There was no need for revenge to be loud or humiliating. The clever, quiet unveiling of truth had been more than enough. Life continued, but differently. I lived with the knowledge that my son had protected me, even from beyond the grave. His love had been my shield, his wisdom my guide. I was able to move forward with a renewed sense of strength, understanding that the bonds of family, of genuine love and trust, could not be broken by deceit. Ada and her lover were reminders of how fragile and short-sighted greed can be, but they were no longer threats to me. The world, once full of betrayal, now felt balanced again. I smile often now, remembering the journey, not just the sorrow, but the cleverness, the persistence, and the quiet joy of justice done. I speak to friends about patience, resilience, and the quiet power of truth. I know that love, foresight, and integrity are gifts that either beside me, whispering that he knew I could do it, that he had faith in me all along. Moral lesson. Life can bring unimaginable loss and betrayal, but love, patience, and trust create paths to triumph even in the darkest moments. Grief is powerful, but it can guide reflection and clarity. True justice doesn't always need anger. Quiet persistence, intelligence, and integrity can reveal the truth and protect those who are devoted and vigilant. Honoring loved ones means respecting their foresight and values, acting with care, and reclaiming dignity without malice. Even when deceived, we can rise stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Love, memory, and courage remain the greatest legacies, shaping victories that endure far beyond hardship.